So when customers engage with us, they're quite often in a place where they've identified a problem themselves, right? They don't call a DevOps consulting service randomly. They have some kind of problem that they've identified, and they want help figuring it out and what's the next thing to do. Probably the biggest engagement, I guess, that I saw was with a really large organization in the oil and gas world, and they had a product that were, I think it's $50,000 a license for this product, so it's a desktop product, and the main problem that they had was that okay, I guess what they thought their main problem was and what actually the main problem was might be different things. This is I'm thinking from retrospect, right? Because I've been through it. And one of the main problems that they had was that they had 90 teams in 13 locations in 9 different countries working on this product. Each of those teams had their own long-term branch that they worked on, so things would diverge. And they could diverge for quite some time, could be as much as a year. And they were trying to mitigate that with an application of force. That's probably the way I would think about it. They tried to solve the problem with an application of force. So what they did was they spun up a DevOps team, right? A dedicated DevOps team. Here's our DevOps engineers. They're in this central area, right? Some of you have already spotted the problem. And then they can't change what all of these teams are doing, but they have to figure out how they solve the problem of, we want continuous delivery. We want to have a daily build of our product. That was their goal. So they ended up creating a bunch of infrastructure to allow them to do that and managing that infrastructure, and they would manage it, right? The teams didn't have to do anything. And if the teams changed something, that was their problem to go fix, right? So you had this team. I think it was 8 or 9, might have been as many as 10 people, but I think it was 8 or 9 people on this team, and their whole job was building this product. So in order to do that, they ended up building a system that facilitated about 11,000 build executions a day. That's 1.2 million build executions a year, and that was just to have a working product every day. So they would have these temporary branches where they brought the code together and like automated merging of code from all of these different branches. All of those different teams, these 90 teams, were all on different source control systems, different, not only systems, but platforms as well. So they might have had 10 teams on Git, 10 teams on Team Foundation version control. They might have had 10 teams on Subversion, another 10 teams doing something else, another 10 teams doing another thing. So they all had different capabilities, different branching capabilities, different merging capabilities, and their build system, their build engine, had to go reach out to all of these systems and pull together a version of the code and then build it to be able to then create this unified version of the product. It was insanely complicated and super expensive. I think in order for a developer to work on the product on their workstation, in fact, to run it in production as well, you had to have like 100 cores. I can't remember exactly what, but it was 128 gig RAM, lots and lots and lots of cores, 24 core machine type of thing. It was just obscene the speed of the machine required, because it was a massive, complicated product, and you couldn't just build parts of it. You had to build the whole thing to make sure it worked, the whole platform and all the things that were built on top of it. And it was just hugely unwieldy. So we did a DevOps assessment, state of DevOps assessment for them. We identified those key areas. Everybody's on different source control systems. Everybody's doing everything differently. They had some limitations because I think there was 13 different funding routes for this product, so they didn't have full control of the whole thing. But what we were able to do was over and it was a number of years because it's a really big product, a really big organization. I think there was something like 700 people working on it, and in different locations, and they weren't in the same reporting structure, right? So you can't just tell them to do stuff. And it took 4 years to get everything aligned into a single source control system, right? So that we could do one build out of this source control system and result in one version of the product. And then how do we fold down the branches so that they don't have so many branches working towards that model? How do we work towards this idea of mainline development, right? It's these types of ideas, these types of outcomes that vastly simplify the problem that companies are trying to solve. And people don't get into these positions from a nefarious intent, right? In this particular example, this product had been built and worked on for 25 years. They had bought anybody who tried to compete with them, so bring that piece into the puzzle, right? And you end up with a massive product with a very complicated architecture that's very difficult and time consuming to work on. So you need lots of people. That's very distributed because all of these different parts of the puzzle were brought in from different entities that now all work for the same company. And they hadn't, I'm actually going to phrase it this way. They hadn't taken the time to pay back their technical debt. They'd accrued debt. You know, we use Git, we take on a company that uses Subversion, and instead of let's help them migrate all of their stuff into Git and fix all of the stuff that we need to fix in order to bring it into our system, we're just going to leave them as is, and we're going to plug into them and pull their stuff out and integrate it into our system. So rather than doing that work, because it seemed insurmountable at the time, they didn't do that. They just pulled the stuff in. And on top of that, perhaps things didn't exist 25 years ago. So they had a lot of teams that were on their own custom in-house built source control system, because when they started working on this product, there were no large-scale source control systems. You were probably talking about Visual Source Safe at the time. But Visual Source Safe was developed at the time of Novell Networks and had a max size of about 5 gig. This thing was ginormous, right? So how do you manage that? Well, you have to build your own systems. When you go to try and create an automated build, perhaps there isn't a commercial automated build system, so you build your own. And then once a commercial automated build system becomes available, you adapt into that, but you're actually just calling out to your existing thing because you've not taken the time to rewrite everything, because that's an insurmountable task. So we integrate it rather than refactor, right? We're missing all of those refactors over time, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and more unwieldy and more unwieldy and more unwieldy. And sometimes it's difficult, that's a terrible expression, but difficult to see the forest for the trees, right? All of these things, like, what should we go fix? Where should we go look? Where should we start? What's our biggest bang for our buck that we can go fix and figure out? And perhaps lots of little things we need to fix around the edge. So what I would expect an organization to get, what's like the outcome and improvements that our customers can expect? It's a more effective process, right? We're talking about taking what the organization is doing right now usually within the context of a product when you're talking about DevOps, but it could be holistically across an organization, and figuring out how do we eliminate waste? How do we ensure that we have automation, that we can automate, that automation is effective, right? Because it's also, you can have ineffective automation like that massive build system I was talking about. And how do we simplify? So what I would expect the outcomes to be would be reduced cost to deliver new features, reduced time to deliver new features, improved happiness of the people that are building in the product, because they're spending less time struggling with the complexity that we've created over time and more time focusing on solving the business problem. So these are multipliers for your capability to deliver. A great example of those multipliers is actually the Azure DevOps team at Microsoft, right? So they create a product called Azure DevOps. It used to be Team Foundation Server when it was local. And back in 2010, before they started doing much more frequent deliveries and all the automation and focusing on these things, before they brought DevOps into their story, they were delivering about 25 features to production each year. And that was with 600 people working on it. And they were delivering about 25 new features, lots of bug fixes, lots of little tweaks, but 25 new features to production each year. Fast forward to 5 years later, they'd spent a huge amount of time investing in reducing the amount of time it takes them to build their product from, I think it was like 3 or 4 days, 72 hours plus to build their product, down to 3.5 minutes, right? Those types of capabilities enabled them to go from 25 features to production each year to nearly 300 features to production each year with the same number of people and the same people. It's not different people, it's the same people, right? So what we're talking about is holistically skilling up all of the people that we have within our context so that everybody understands DevOps, everybody understands refactoring and clean code and what the impact is on all of these things so that we can make them more effective over time. And yeah, you'll be faster, you'll be slicker, and it will be cheaper, right? That's what we're talking about when we talk about bringing DevOps and the DevOps philosophy into an organization. But it takes skill. We can't install DevOps in your organization. You still have to do the work. If you can find a consultancy that says that they will do all the work for you, your people are not going to learn anything. They're not going to have gone through the pain of actually fixing their problems. It's like getting a cleaner in to clean your teenager's room, right? Has your teenager learned to clean up their room? No, they haven't. They're just going to do the same thing over and over and over again. When you do those big rewrites of your product and you take the same people and get them to rewrite your product, what do you think is going to be the outcome except a rewritten product that's in exactly the same state over time as your existing product, because they've not gone through that crucible of learning the pain of actually cleaning up, the pain of pulling that moldy plate out from under the bed and I have to deal with this moldy plate, and maybe next time I won't leave the plate because I don't want to deal with that moldy plate, right? That's what we're talking about with engineering practices. We're talking about upskilling, dealing with our own crap, right? Dealing with it ourselves so that we make less of that stuff in the future, that we do things in a better way that enables us to be slicker and more effective.